Well, what do you say, Professor Pruitt? We just jump right in,
Yeah, yeah, we're
talking
taping.
about renewable, or excuse me, the energy transition to renewable energy. It is a meaty topic, a detailed topic, and we have the best person to help wade through all that, Professor Mark Pruitt. Welcome, sir. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. And you're right, this is kind of a meaty topic. So, just to de-risk this for everybody, we're not making you renewable energy experts, right? We're probably going to focus more on understanding key concepts, where to find the data, and how to think about which of the renewable energy options make the best sense for your municipality. Once you flag things that are of interest, then you can dig in. And if you want help with that, getting the details and building a strategy and your tactics, um, of course, we can help with that. But today's not going to give you soup to nuts. We're going to hit it at a high level. But even saying that, there's a lot to cover. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And we're keeping the same agenda as always, a little bit of housekeeping. We'll talk our recommended readings, website of the week, then lecture, and then we'll hopefully have some time at the end for comments and Q&A. I would invite everybody that if you do have questions that come up, throw them into the chat, and they'll be moderated by Cheryl and or Edith. That seems to have worked out pretty well in the past. So any announcements from MMC, Cheryl?
Yes, so we missed a week of the Wednesday class. So now our Wednesday class schedule is actually after the Thursday class. So what I mean is if you were to miss the class today or you wanted to attend again, the class 6 will be held on Wednesday the 12th. And this is also for anyone who's kind of switches between Thursdays and Wednesdays, depending on your schedule. And then the class 7 for Wednesday will be held on April 26th. So that will actually follow the Thursday class. We'll be updating the website and updating the Wednesday group as well about that. Is one more announcement. There is a webinar coming up through the Illinois Alliance for Clean Transportation, and ComEd will be presenting on their approach to transportation electrification. They'll be talking about distribution capacity planning, customer engagement, and more. So I'll put the link in the chat because we thought that might be of interest to this group.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. As you know, we've been having a kind of an ongoing open call for topics that we can all work on for about 10 hours of my time as a follow-on to the class. So the idea is that the sessions and the class foster ideas of what you would like to do in your own community. We know that there's always going to be more detailed work to build a program around these concepts. So that's what this 10 hours is for. It's to really dig in and put together the block and tackling to get a program together. So we've had a few suggestions. We've had folks express interest in learning more about smart grids, learning about microgrids, the franchise account issue, and also to talk in more depth about the new federal energy incentives through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act. So we're going to put out the call one more time to requests to allow folks to put in topics for requests. We'll noodle on it on our side, figure out what is a good fit for that 10 hours, and we'll come back to you with some recommendations. We also always are open to recommendations for the program. I'll just give you a heads up that next week's course or session is going to provide a bit more detail on the franchise account issue because it does have bearing on the session topic, which is energy efficiency. So with that, we're just going to go ahead and dig into our resources. Some kind of interesting things for you to click through on the hyperlinks in green. The first is a proceeding by the Illinois Commerce Commission that is now underway called the Renewable Energy Access Plan. So we all are probably familiar that Illinois has a renewable portfolio standard, and it seeks to encourage the development of renewables within Illinois and have that grow over time. At the same time, the legislature recognized that there are probably barriers to successfully deploying all the renewables that are necessary to meet the state's RPS goals. So therefore, the Commerce Commission was charged with the responsibility of coming up with a REAP. The REAP is there to identify a pathway to ensure that those renewable energy goals are met in Illinois. And so it's a lot of interesting topics there. So the REAP webpage takes you to the Illinois Commerce Commission. There's also a separate ICC case that is now taking testimony and comments from registered stakeholders. I'm advising a couple of parties that are submitting comments. So I've been spending a lot of time in that, and I thought I'd just go ahead and share it with you. Second is, it's not a plug, but it's a good example of how community solar can work for residential ratepayers. The CS Squared program is offered by the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. You can see a click through to the program page where Cheryl has laid everything out for you in terms of how that program works. And this is just a ready-made community solar program that you can sign on to, roll out to your residents, and give them an opportunity to access community solar. Just a word about that is right now we're in a bit of a lull in terms of the supply of community solar. Yes, there will be more community solar coming online as a result of the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, but it takes time for those assets to be built. So anyone who's interested in the CS Squared program, I recommend using this lull time right now before these new assets are built towards the end of this year, beginning of next year, to look at the program and figure out how it fits within your community. Start talking about it, not necessarily advertising, but thinking about whether or not this is a good fit for you. If it is, great, you proceed, you show up, we do all of our prep work, and once we have community solar subscriptions available, we'll get them going for you. I know right now that we have a minimum of 4 new community solar farms that are going to be available to us, and we're building on that volume right now. And then lastly, I think we might have touched on this on a prior session, but there's a group in Boston area that operates under the name of HEET, H-E-E-T, the Home Energy Efficiency Team. This is a nonprofit that has identified an approach, a cooperative approach, that they've developed with their local natural gas utility to convert residential gas service to all electric service. And I know that some communities are looking to go, electrify everything, but there's this issue of, well, how do we handle heating? How do we handle heating and cooling? How do we handle appliances? And this group has a shared ground source heat pump approach that works, again, cooperatively with the natural gas utility to bring all electric service to existing residential customers. So I thought it was interesting. I spoke with them at some length on a microgrid proposal I was working on a number of months ago, and they seemed very solid to me. Lots of good technology savvy, as well as understanding how the system operates. So they're good people, and I think you can count on their approach being solid. So, website of the week. This is the U.S. Energy Atlas, and as you can tell, I'm kind of a visual person, but I keep coming back to these visual options because I think when we are communicating with the public, it's always helpful to have a visual, right? It helps you tell the story so that you don't have to spend a lot of time drilling down into the details. You can show the overview. So this is one of the better ones that I've seen. It's available through the Energy Information Administration, which is part of Department of Energy, and it allows you to look at various aspects of energy infrastructure throughout the United States. So this is how your map starts. Well, by clicking through various layers, you can zoom in on different regions of the United States. Zoomed in here to Illinois. And then you can start to click and say, well, I'd like to see natural gas pipelines. That's what you have here. The blue ones are primary interstate natural gas pipelines. The light blue lines are intrastate distribution natural gas pipelines. And you can zoom in and get a clearer picture of of where gas service and infrastructure resides. You can also click over to electricity and see where the primary transmission lines are in the dark colors here. You see, say, Chicago towards the center of the map, and you see lines coming in from central Illinois. Well, lo and behold, there are power plants in central and southern Illinois that are directly connected up into the northern Illinois grid through transmission lines. The Powerton plant down by Peoria, and as well as plants further south, do have direct connection into PJM, our northern Illinois wholesale market, as well as connections into their local market in downstate Illinois, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. You also have light purple lines showing higher voltage transmission and distribution lines throughout the region as well. So it's just a way of giving folks a perspective of where the power comes from, how it moves about. You can also go to generating assets, right? The gray windmills show you wind farms. The orange sun splashes give you solar. The little green leaves give you biomass. And then you can even zoom in and click on one of these resources and get information about that power plant, right? Its name, plant code within the EIA database, the owner, its location, and description of the technology. This happens to be a landfill gas facility located in South Elgin. So again, this just gives you the atlas, right? It helps you tell the story of, when we're talking about energy, where is that energy being generated? How is it moving? And what does it look like on a regional level? So more of one of those context building tools. And I hope if you're ever giving presentations, that tools like this help cement the idea of how the system works for your residents. So on to the lecture. So we're doing a few things today. We're going to first do a very fast technology overview of when we talk about renewables, what are we talking about? How do they work? Now, some of you might already know all this, but maybe we need to level set to make sure everybody understands when we say renewables, we're talking about a category of power generation. How does that generation work? What are some of its constraints? So we're going to touch on that. Then we're going to talk about the Illinois Renewable Portfolio Standard. Then we're going to talk about how consumers can approach renewables purchasing in Illinois. So the idea here is to daisy chain these issues. But let's start here before we start our high-speed, low-drag tour of renewables in Illinois. So wind and solar are the policy preferred renewable options in Illinois. Those are the ones that are earmarked primarily for funding by the state legislature. But when we talk about wind, in case you haven't driven through central Illinois or northern Indiana, these are ginormous wind turbines that stand several stories tall. The wind blows, the turbine turns, and as you see in the diagram at the top, you see the blades, you see the pitch system, you see the rotor. And what you have here is essentially a series of gears and shafts to turn a turbine. As we spoke about early on in the course, when you turn a turbine, you can generate an electric current. Well, because wind is somewhat variable, sometimes it's too windy, sometimes it's not windy enough, you have very sophisticated controls in the what's called the nacelle, N-A-C-E-L-L-E, of the wind turbine. That's where all the mechanics are up at the top. And it applies a series of brakes and controls that try to moderate the speed of the turbine to generate a more constant flow of energy from that turbine down into a local transformer. And from that transformer, it gets stepped up to the distribution system, to the utility, to power our homes. So most wind projects are utility scale, meaning very large. Each of these turbines at its maximum output generate between 1 and 2 megawatts of electricity. That's between 1,000 and 2,000 kilowatts. So every hour one of these is operating at its full output, it's generating between 1 and 2 megawatt hours or 1,000 to 2,000 kilowatt hours. Solar is very popular right now. It is also a variable output resource, meaning that it only works when the resource is available, right? So just like a wind farm only operates when there's wind, solar panels only operates when there's sunshine, right? So this is a nice diagram from the Solar Power Guide, folks, that essentially just, when you have sunlight, sunlight is actually made up of photons. When those photons hit the solar panel, that solar panel is made of silicon wafers. When the photons experience and collide with the silicon panels, that process moves electrons from the silicon panels free. And then immediately those electrons move back. But in that movement is an electric charge. If you get enough of these together in a solar panel, you can have a more or less consistent charge of electricity coming from that solar panel. That electricity is then collected, and it is created at direct current. It is then converted to alternating current through the use of an inverter. And once that electricity that was DC and now is AC is it's now free to be used in the house, in the building, where the solar panels are located, or that electricity can be exported to the local distribution or transmission system, which is also AC. So something to think about for wind and solar is that, yes, they're preferred resources. They have a lot of different applications. They're also fairly what we would call diffuse energy sources. You have to have a lot of area to turn these resources into a significant energy, right? So compare a solar farm to the footprint of a natural gas plant. You're going to find that a solar farm that might be 10 acres in size might only be generating a maximum output of, say, 1.5 megawatts, whereas a 10-acre natural gas power plant might be able to generate 50 or 80 megawatts, right? So that's the diffuse nature of the energy source. So it's not a criticism, it's just an observation, right? You need a lot of wind and solar resources to replace a natural gas, coal, or nuclear power plant. Just how it works. Biomass. A lot of people think of biomass as, okay, well, I'm going to burn wood and then I'm going to make steam and turn a turbine. Absolutely. You can do that a lot. You do that a lot with wood pellets. The challenge with that approach with biomass is that you really need a lot of consistency in your fuel to be able to keep a boiler operating on that fuel source. And the consistency of the boiler operation is necessary to ensure the consistency of the electricity. So the current move in biomass is to say, let's do this a little bit differently. Let's take all that different types of biological material, let's pulverize it, standardize it, and then gasify it. Let's drive the methane gases and flammable gases off of that feedstock so that we're not burning it or combusting it directly. And through that gasification process, we have a more consistent fuel source. Once you have that more consistent gas fuel, you can store that gas and run it through a power generator. You can use it to drive a methanol process for fuel, right? You have a lot more options that you can do. There's a plant under development in Gary, Indiana, that will do this with landfill waste, plastics in landfill waste. And their goal is to use a gasification process to produce jet fuel. Right? So interesting technology, very technology heavy. Landfill gas, we have a lot of landfill gas in Illinois. Landfill gas is really a process of collecting the methane that comes from decomposing materials that are in covered landfills and cleaning it up. That methane that comes off the landfills is very wet, has a lot of moisture content, and it's not just pure methane. It's not like natural gas. There's a number of impurities. So it needs to be collected. It needs to then be cleaned, right? And drive off the moisture, drive out the impurities. Then it needs to be compressed. And once it's compressed, it can go into power generation or into a boiler or can generate electricity to go onto the grid. So all those things are options. There are now newer technologies that US EPA outlines here called advanced treatment, and that is having a mini refinery take that that cleaned landfill gas and converting that into a higher BTU heat content vehicle fuel. So in essence, you could have landfill gas station for large trucks and diesel engines in the future. So again, very technology intensive, but this is a technology that already has quite a bit of infrastructure already in place in Illinois. Hydroelectric, a lot of people have seen pictures of the Hoover Dam and I think that really tells the story of hydroelectric. Hydroelectric is running pressurized water through a turbine. That turbine spins a generator, and the generator generates electricity. So how do you concentrate the flow of water? Well, you have what's called head. Head is the distance between where water starts at the beginning of the process and where it ends. This works well in mountainous areas where the water has a downhill run to go to. Not so great in the Midwest where things are fairly flat, but we do have a number of hydroelectric dams in the region, and they don't generate a substantial amount of power, but they are very good baseload, more or less baseload power generation. The Lockport, in Lockport, there's a powerhouse that's owned by the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District that operates this way. Some of our municipal utilities own hydropower. Rock Falls, Illinois, and I think down around LaSalle, Peru, there's also small hydroelectric dams that are still operating and have been operating without fail for many, many years. So the challenge with hydroelectric is that it's very hard to get a new hydroelectric dam built because of concerns of fish, aquatic life, and the like. But a subset of hydroelectric dams called run-of-river hydro is possible, and maybe that's something that technologically makes sense for those communities that are along, say, the Des Plaines River or some of the other low head application rivers within Illinois. Geothermal. I'm not really going to show you that much about geothermal making power. You need to be in the Western United States or somewhere in the Ring of Fire in the Pacific Rim where you can drill a hole deep enough that you get close to superheated subsurface sources to generate steam. That's not what we're talking about here. In Illinois, geothermal's best use is as a heat sink, right? So you go down 50 feet below the surface in the soil in Illinois, you're going to find a very stable set of temperatures. Once you have that stable set of temperatures, you can build a loop that circulates a refrigerant down into that space. And through the use of heat exchangers, you can use that heat within the earth to run heating and cooling in an individual house. Something that's very interesting is that if you have a large enough number of these wells, right, the deep sinks, you can run a district heating and cooling that supports heating and cooling for multiple buildings. So this is an interesting aspect of this technology that's built out over the past few years, in that it used to be geothermal was thought of as a kind of a one and done, one building for one system. Well, this whole new system thinking is really taken hold, and it's taken hold at some college campuses. Ball State University in Indiana has a very large geothermal district heating and cooling system that serves the entire campus. So it is very, very impressive. And as an energy source, we think about this as renewable energy because if you're using this, you don't have to use as much heating and cooling equipment that burn fossil fuels. All you're doing is taking heat from the earth. So that's always going to be there. So therefore it's renewable. That's the thing. And then hydrogen. I put hydrogen in here because it's not, to my mind, renewable. It's more energy storage, but a lot of people have been hearing about green hydrogen. And I just wanted to give you my definition and you can build your own. But Green hydrogen is not renewable energy. It can store energy. And if it stores renewable energy, then great. Maybe this is a solution for that variable output nature of wind and solar. So the idea is that sometimes you have too much renewable energy. Okay, great. Well, instead of turning off the turbine or turning off the solar asset because we have too much energy, maybe that energy can be deferred or moved over into an electrolysis process that converts water into hydrogen. Okay, so great. Now I've got hydrogen that was made from renewable energy. Terrific. That hydrogen is stored as a gas. Okay. Once it's stored as a gas, that means you could use it anytime you want. If you get to nighttime or non-windy time of the day, you can release that stored hydrogen into a fuel cell, or in some cases, a combustion cycle set, and generate electricity to allow you to balance out and supplement when you don't have enough wind and solar. So I know there's a lot of talk about green hydrogen, and I just wanted to address this because I think some people think that hydrogen itself is energy. It's not. It's energy storage, but it can be primed using renewables. That's green hydrogen. I believe that there's also a plan afoot to have low carbon hydrogen that's fueled primarily from nuclear power plants, also out there with its own branding. Maybe it'll be blue or pink or something like that. But suffice to say, there are a lot of renewable energy options out there, and I just hope this quick walk gives you a level set to think about how each of these might work or not work within your own communities. So that's the technology. Let's talk about the policy. And sorry, but this is the extent of my artwork, right? I do line graphs, so just follow me along. So the Illinois Renewable Portfolio Standard, or RPS, requires the investor-owned utilities to purchase renewable energy credits from renewable developers to match a portion of their load. So the way it works is that the Illinois Commerce Commission and the Illinois Power Agency develop a plan, the long-term renewable resources plan, that Ameren, ComEd, and MidAmerican must follow. Ameren, ComEd, and MidAmerican must enter into agreements with renewable energy asset developers, and they must pay them to purchase their renewable energy credits. One renewable energy credit is generated for every 1,000 kilowatt hours of renewable energy that's delivered into the grid, right? So ComEd and Ameren and MidAmerican purchase the RECs, they receive the RECs. Those RECs are proof that renewable energy has been generated in Illinois. So they don't do that for free. Every consumer served by Ameren, ComEd, and MidAmerican receive a monthly bill. On that monthly bill are RPS charges that cover the cost of the utilities for the purchase of those renewable energy credits. And everybody who pays their bill every month is paying for that renewable portfolio standard compliance. It adds up to about $580 million a year right now, and it will expand over time to a little bit more than $600 million a year. And those funds, the REC payments going from the utilities to the renewable developers, those provide the security that's necessary for the renewable developers to be able to finance new wind and new solar in Illinois. So there's a circuit here. The Illinois RPS is not what the utilities report on their environmental disclosure statement. I've gotten this question a few times from municipalities in the past to say, you know, I've got this report that comes from ComEd, and it tells me how much renewable energy they're buying. Not really. So the Illinois RPS, the policy, is based on how many renewable energy credits the utilities purchase. The environmental disclosure statement identifies the sources of actual energy, not the RECs, but the energy that is in the electricity that ComEd delivers to its customers. So you see here that you've got a little bit of solar power, 1% on this December 1, 2022 report, 4% wind, and 1% other resources, and 1% hydro. So I just wanted to make certain that you understood that there's a difference between the two, and that sometimes that difference can be meaningful. So what's the status of the renewable portfolio standard? How good is Illinois at meeting its goal? So what I have here is some data from the Illinois Power Agency. You see the citation down at the bottom, and we measure compliance on an annual basis from June 1 of each year through May 31 of the following year. And the goal in the 2020 to 2021 period, the goal was 18% of our load should have been matched by renewable energy credits, right? 21 million of them, as a matter of fact. Look at the third column here. How many RECs were delivered? Well, 3.3 million. So what was the shortfall? About 17.8 million. So we had a goal of 18% in 2020, 2021. The effective RPS fulfillment in that year was 2.7%, which means that the shortfall was 15.3%. And you can see how we were in 2021, 22. And now in 22, 23, the goal is 21%. Move across the table, and you see that we're on target to hit 6.6% RPS compliance this year, which means that we're still 14.4% short of goal. So if you guessed early on and said, well, Illinois probably isn't meeting its goals, well, you were correct. What's the outlook? Well, the policy under the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act seeks to increase the REC purchases to match 40% of Illinois' the load requirements for Ameren, ComEd, and Mid-American, to match 40% of that load with renewable energy credits. And you see that's in the green line going from left to right, going all the way up to 40%. And we convert those percentages on the right-hand axis to the number of RECs on the left-hand axis. And what you have here from the Illinois Power Agency is just a mapping of, okay, going forward between now and 2030 program year, what do we already have secured? Well, those are the colored portions of the columns in each of the years. You see light blue, dark blue, yellow, and green, right? And then a gray area. The gray area is what is yet to be procured, right? So if you think about this, we've been working on the Illinois RPS since 2007. And in that time, we've gotten up to, let's go back, we've gotten up to 6.6% in a little bit over 15 years, right? Started in 2007, we're now in 2023, we're at 6.6%. Somehow, we're going to get to 40% by 2030, 2031. So we'll see if it happens. But the point I bring here isn't to criticize anyone. It's just to remind folks that if you are counting on the state and the state RPS to meet your local renewable energy or sustainability goals, you might want to have a fallback proposition, right? A contingency plan in case the state's RPS continues to fail to meet its goals. Okay, so that's the policy. Let's talk about the options. How do I buy renewable energy in Illinois? So first and easiest is to simply purchase renewable energy credits. So as I mentioned before, a renewable energy credit proves it's a receipt, right? And it proves that 1,000 kilowatt hours of renewable energy was generated by some resource at some point at some place, right? We don't know exactly where, but it represents the environmental attributes of the energy, or the renewable part of renewable energy. So looking at the quick graph here, you've got traditional energy generation, right? Coal, natural gas, and the others. And then you've got renewable energy generation. Great. All the energy, the electricity from those assets goes into the power pool. That's where they all get mixed together. So you can't deliver renewable energy to an end user unless that renewable energy asset is located right where that user is. So how do people say that they're 100% renewable energy, as I saw in the pizza place the other day? right? They said, we're 100% renewable energy. Well, I looked, they didn't have any solar panels, they didn't have any wind turbines, they didn't have a geothermal system. How were they claiming 100% renewables? Well, they bought renewable energy credits from a renewable energy generator. When a consumer buys energy from the grid, and then they separately buy renewable energy credits from a generator and put them together, that qualifies them to claim that they are 100% renewable or 50% renewable. Okay? The combination of the REC with the grid supply allows people to make that claim. In Illinois, most of the renewable energy credits that people buy for those purposes are produced in other states. So Texas wind, Northern Plains wind, and others. Most of the RECs that are generated in Illinois are already being purchased by the utilities as part of the Illinois RPS policy. And also, it's only through long-term REC payments that new renewable energy assets are built. I know a lot of communities have purchased renewable energy credits for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years at a time. That's great, but those 1 year, 2 year, 3 year purchases are not causing new renewable energy assets to be built. They are simply supporting the operations of existing renewable energy generation. So in the industry, the term of additionality is important. And if you're buying short-term RECs from existing resources, that does not lead to additionality or more renewable energy resources. So renewable energy credits, easy. Most of them cost about $5 a megawatt hour right now, and you can get them from anywhere. Next level of effort is distributed generation. This is putting solar or some other type of renewable energy generation on your facilities, right? It's called behind the meter, meaning it's on your facility. It's going to generate electricity that you're going to use at your facility. So what happens sometimes is that your electricity generation doesn't match your consumption pattern. So when you have too much energy from your distributed generation system, it gets exported to the grid, and that's called, net crediting. When your solar panels don't generate electricity at night, but you still need heating, cooling, and lighting, that electricity is going to come from the grid. That's called, a net delivery. Put those together, net exports, net imports, and you get net metering, right? So you're kind of balancing the generation of your DG system with the grid. So in total, you're using less energy from the grid, but you're not separating yourself from the grid. And you see kind of the track that the energy flows are in a DG type of a circumstance. So one interesting thing about DG systems in Illinois is that, particularly if it's solar, the utility will purchase all of the RECs that you generate for a 20-year period and pay you a substantial fee for that on an ongoing basis. You can then use that fee to help pay for the system. Could pay for as much as 25 to 30% of the system cost through the sale of your renewable energy credits. However, once you sell the renewable energy credits to the utility, it's no longer renewable energy that you're using. You're using energy from the solar panels on your roof, but it's not renewable. You sold the renewableness to the utility when you sold that REC. So I know it might seem confusing, but this is part of what you're going to have to work through in developing your policy is, what is it that we're going to call renewable? Is it the renewable energy credit, or is it the use of the energy from a renewable energy asset, right? You got to be careful in the words that you use, because sometimes the renewable police will come and shake their finger at you if you say the wrong thing. Next option, community solar. So if you can't put it on your roof, or you don't have enough roof to offset all of your consumption, well, in Illinois, many consumers can get a piece of a large community solar farm, right? So instead of bringing the solar to your home, you can go to the farm and have a portion of that farm's output credited to your account, right? So you're not using your roof, it's out in the field, it's out in the countryside, the electricity is delivered to ComEd, ComEd tracks how much electricity is generated. They compare that monthly generation to your account and your subscription that tells them how much of that electricity generation from the solar farm is attributable to you. And then your bill gets credited with that amount of electricity month after month. This is pretty neat because in Illinois, there's no upfront cost to the consumer. So therefore, this is always a discount on the bill. It works out pretty well, and it's going to get better with some changes that we're expecting to be implemented this year with billing. But again, the subscribers to Community Solar are not buying renewable energy because the renewable energy credits from that community solar farm are being bought by ComEd. So you are supporting solar development in Northern Illinois by participating in community solar because you're sharing some of those credits back to the community solar farm. But again, it's not technically renewable energy. You can do the self-direct under the RPS. If you are in the aggregate, have a demand for electricity that's greater than 10 megawatts and you're served by Ameren, ComEd, and Mid-American, you already know that you're making your monthly RPS payments, about $5 a megawatt hour. You know that the utility is purchasing RECs on your behalf from renewable energy developers. Well, under the self-direct program, if you're a large energy user, you can, in essence, opt out of a part of the renewable portfolio standard. You can enter into your own agreement to purchase RECs from renewable energy developers. You can then keep your RECs. They'll still count against the state's RPS goal, but you get to keep them. So you get to keep all of the environmental claims. You can claim to be purchasing renewable energy because you have the RECs, and you get a portion of your rebate, your RPS payments rebated back to you by the utility. So if you're a large energy user in the aggregate under single ownership, so you can't band together a bunch of separate municipalities to do this, it has to be your own municipal load, you can step out at least for a portion of your RPS and do it yourself, right? And claim back some of your renewable portfolio standard charges. One last item here is the virtual power purchase agreement. So this is completely outside of the Illinois RPS. And a virtual power purchase agreement is a long-term agreement. We're talking minimum 10, most likely minimum 15, and as long as 25 years. And the way it works is this. A renewable energy project starts to be under development. A large wind farm, a large solar farm, 20 megawatts, 50 megawatts, 100 megawatts. And that asset is being prepared and it's being planned. But it needs a buyer to be able to secure the financing. So what you could do is you, as a municipality, could enter into an agreement with that developer to say, I will purchase all of the energy and RECs from that project for 15 to 20 years. That's box B here. With the security of your promise that you're going to buy that energy, the developer can finance and then build that wind farm, solar farm, other resource. But instead of delivering that electricity directly to your facilities, which can't be done, we do a financial settlement. And the financial settlement works like this. The developer operates that wind farm and moves that energy into the regional grid. When it delivers that energy, say 1 megawatt hour of electricity, it gets paid. The developer gets paid whatever the market rate is for that electricity when that electricity was generated. Let's just say it's $50 a megawatt hour. Great. So now the developer is delivering electricity and taking in revenue. Then on a monthly basis, you, the buyer, and the developer sit down and you say, okay, let's settle. The developer gives you the wholesale energy payments that they've earned, $50 a megawatt hour in panel D, plus the REC, the one REC that was generated for the delivery of that 1 megawatt hour to the grid. And that's, so you get $50 and a REC, right? You then make your VPPA payment, your virtual power purchase agreement payment of $55. So you're trading, right? What this does is it says net, you paid 55, you got back 50, so you paid $5. What did you get at the end of the day? you got that one renewable energy credit, right? So not only did you get the one renewable energy credit, but you also supported the development of that new additive resource that, but for your commitment, would not have been built. So this is the approach that Microsoft and Google and all these firms that you hear about. This is how they're doing it. They're not building these resources on their land. They're finding a developer who's got a good piece of property and a plan and a price, and they're settling things up here through the virtual power purchase agreement. So those are your options. What can you do, based on our prior model? Remember, we had control, sponsor, influence, right, for municipalities and their role in the energy sector. So let's start with control. What does the municipality control and what can you do? Well, for your municipal accounts that you already have in place, you could purchase renewable energy credits and make that load renewable, right? Just cost money. You could install distributed generation at your municipal facilities. You could sign on to community solar. You could do self-direct if you're large enough. You could enter into a virtual power purchase agreement, right? You have all those options for your own municipal facilities. You could band together with multiple municipalities and do a group purchase of RECs, distributed generation, community solar, and virtual PPAs, right? So you don't have to go alone. You can work collaboratively. You could also use your municipal property to host renewables. I'm thinking community solar. You could put community solar on a parking garage or a parking lot. And if you don't want to use that electricity within municipal operations, that electricity can go out to the ComEd grid. Well, once it's on the ComEd grid, it can serve as community solar and be claimed by residents within your community. So those are things that you can control. What are some programs you can sponsor that have renewable components? Well, municipal aggregation is very popular. You could put renewable energy credits or community solar or virtual power purchase agreement into your municipal aggregation program, right? Takes some effort, but you can get there. You could launch a commercial PACE program within your community that provides mezzanine or project financing for distributed generation, right? You can make that happen within your community through the standardized Illinois policy supported PACE programming. You could do rooftop and organize a rooftop solar group buy for your residents. You could hire somebody, in the business to be your green energy broker for residents in your community. That would be a dedicated entity that would provide guidance and bidding support and contract support for your residents who on their own want to purchase RECs or distributed generation or community solar or self-direct or virtual power purchase agreements, right? You can do that, right? You, the municipality, would not be able to do it, but you could select somebody to serve that role and make it easier through a sponsored program for your residents to gain access to this range of options of renewables. Then you can influence. This comes down to code requirements. Maybe there's an option to put code requirements that require all new construction to meet certain solar ready standards, right? So that the eventual occupant of the property has the option of putting solar onto their facility and having an easier time of tying into their electric system. Whenever you have development agreements, you can put renewable energy requirements on that developer to purchase and perhaps contribute a certain number of renewable energy credits, to implement distributed generation, to subscribe to community solar or host community solar. Again, think of those parking lots at the mall, right? They could also be required to look at self-direct or virtual power purchase agreements. Those start getting into some legal issues, and so I leave that to your learned counsel to give you guidance on those last few issues. But when you start to send out the signal that this is important to you, you can start to influence the decisions of developers, right? They want to please you because they need you, right? So maybe some of these concepts could be woven into the projects that are coming in the future. So Just a few key points I want you to just really cement. First is that, you could rely on the Illinois RPS, which sets a goal of 40% renewables by 2040, but, in the past, RPS goals haven't been met, and we don't know for certain that they're going to be met in the future. So I don't know what happens to your sustainability plan if it's partly dependent upon the state meeting its RPS goals. You might want to have a contingency. You also, hopefully one of your takeaways here is you understand that you've got a lot of options here in terms of setting your renewable energy goals. It's not hard and fast rules. You're adopting a standard. That means you can control what you're adopting, right? So just remember that renewable means different things to different people. Some people say, I need a renewable energy credit to count something as renewable energy. Okay, that's fine. You can definitely do that. You can say, I need a renewable energy credit from a resource in Illinois or within my county. You can define it however you want, but just be mindful that most of the RECs that are available right now in Illinois are probably from a wind farm in Texas. And is that renewable for a sustainability plan and renewable energy goal in greater metropolitan Chicago? I don't know. That's up to you. But just be mindful that when you settle on one of these definitions, that you might have to live with it, right? And you just might want to have in mind, how challenging is this going to be moving forward? And then, again, do you want to have things like additionality? Do you want to be able to point to and say, not only do I have RECs, but I was able to bring about new renewable development within Illinois? Or am I simply interested? I'm not so interested in RECs, but I'm interested in clean energy sources, right? If we can show that we're using energy from solar resources on our own facilities while we're selling the RECs to ComEd, but that energy we're using is not polluting, maybe you could write a standard around that. I just encourage you to be expansive in your thinking, and you can always tighten up things later. It gets more difficult from a policy perspective to loosen things up later, right? So I just encourage you to go into this eyes open. And as always, appreciate your time and attention. And I think we've got a couple of minutes left for Q&A. So I'll try to back out of this, and we'll try to answer any questions that have arisen.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Edith and Cheryl, are any questions on the chat that you want to manage, or?
Nothing in the chat. So if anyone has a question, just go ahead and come on camera, raise your hand, and ask Mark. We're a small enough group, we could do that.
I'll begin if I could, Mark, and perhaps others are thinking the same question. The information is fantastic. My position would be, is it fair to state that based on the challenges of the transition, based on the challenges of the technology, the cost, etc., is there still optimism from experts like yourself that we can achieve the goals established through CEJA and other policy initiatives? Or is that still a very steep mountain to climb?
Well, I'm still confident that you can get there. I think it's more, instead of being a direct flight to LA, it's going to be more of a Griswold vacation trip to LA, right? There's going to be some
That is the takeaway of this entire course, right there.
It's a challenge for policymakers many times to resist the urge to come up with a quick slogan, right? 25% renewables by 2025 without contemplating what all has to change, right? So there's going to be some failures. There's going to be new technologies, new facts on the ground. So I would just encourage the municipalities to learn from what the states have experienced, right? There's very few states that have actually met their goals ever. I think Iowa and Texas are the only ones that I'm immediately aware of. So as we start to think about, okay, well, what is our goal? I wouldn't be so constrained to say, well, we need to take that state goal and then beat it. That state goal might not be a great benchmark. You can make a very good progress on your own and supplement what the state's doing. And I think that that's probably what we're going to see more of, is local action to supplement what's happening or not happening at the state. I'm sorry if there was so much information that your eyes are pinwheeling, but this is actually the scaled down version of the stuff. So I know it's a challenge, and I know it's not your day job. But
let me do a follow-up then. How would you advise anyone on this call, or anyone else who perhaps is as educated as you are regarding the challenges or the reality, when we and they and all of us are perhaps challenged by folks who say all you have to do is blank?
Yeah. First, don't take it personally. They don't know what they're talking about. Second, I would invest a little bit of time and generate a study or an analysis. And I don't think it takes years to do this, a couple of weeks. Analyze what is attainable within your community, right? Take a look at that SLED data and say, what's our consumption? Then take a look at available space using the ComEd portal. Tells us how much solar is there. Use some of these other tools and say, look, within our community, we can generate this much renewable energy compared to a consumption of that much renewable energy or energy consumption. What's the delta? Well, here are the options available and here's their approximate costs. I think a lot of people think it's simple because they haven't done the homework. So that means you have to do the homework and show your work. And I don't think it has to be a sustainability plan per se, but I think it's an attainable, what's attainable from within the community based on what we know today. It'll change. New technology will come about, new ideas, but I think not to think defensively, but just to level set people's understanding of this is where we're at today. I think that's completely fair. And I think that the people who say it's simple, just do this, they'll appreciate it. They might not appreciate it immediately, but I think over time they'll appreciate it because that's a lot of information that they're just not aware of.
Thank you. Anyone else, chime in, please. Anything you've learned today, have curiosity about, or perhaps a 30,000-foot question that I just lobbied at Mark?
Or you could tell me I'm wrong. That's fine.
Mark, I have a question to follow on what Kevin was asking, and I'm just dazzled by the gap, the renewable gap. So what's the process for reporting this to the legislature? Kind of who knows about it, who's sounding the alarm? I appreciate what Kevin's saying about, okay, or what you're saying is that the state isn't going to get us there, so let's go ahead and do what we can and set our own local goals. But I still think there's something to be said for, setting a goal that might have been shooting a little bit high, and now there's a lot of expectation in the popular world. CEJA got a lot of messaging, so it had a lot of messaging success. There are a lot of devotees of CEJA who really think everything's solved now, and it sounds like we're just not there. So yeah, tell me more about the process for really sharing this information.
So, this type of information is available if you dig, right? The long-term renewable resources procurement plan that the IPA puts out reports out all this data and what they've delivered and then what their projections are. So if you're a nerd, you can get there. For the general public, it's probably not immediately accessible. It's just dense. For the policymakers, I think that they're aware of the shortcomings. There's about 30 bills, maybe 42 bills in Springfield right now that touch on energy. And a number of them are really trying to guide and streamline processes to facilitate and accelerate delivery. I think that there's probably also going to be a reconfiguration of the agencies that are responsible for meeting these goals so that they'll have more resources to apply in this direction. So I think that the knowledge is there. I don't think people want to highlight it because, people like to see progress, not correcting failures, right? So whatever you see will probably come in the context of, well, we're improving on what we did in CEJA. But I think it's pretty well known. or should be well known that, it's just not there. And that's okay, right? This is hard. The state used to simply be able to purchase renewable energy credits from anywhere to meet its goal, right? We've changed now that those RECs have to come from resources in Illinois that meet a lot of different conditions. Okay, well, you change the rules halfway through, you're going to get a different measurement towards your benchmark. So I think people understand what's there. I think that probably you'll start to see more reporting from, say, PJM and MISO about the gap, not on meeting the RPS goals, but just in terms of replacing standard power generation with renewables. I think that will probably raise awareness. When people start hearing about outages and blackouts, that tends to focus the attention a bit more.
So we are at the top of the hour. Anybody else questions?
If time, Mayor Burns, you were on mute.
Oh, no, yeah, that's your question, I believe, right?
Yeah,
That's a great question.
I just wanted to ask Mark if you could lean into that last part about what the actual barriers are to closing the gap or related to closing the gaps. And I know that it's layered, but how much of, and I actually appreciated that point about, like, we changed the rules in a way that said we cannot simply buy them from everywhere. And I think that I still support that there was meaning there. Otherwise, we'd still be locked into 20-year contracts in other states. But with that said, are we running into, like, this? Is it a spatial issue? Is it a technical issue? Is it, maybe that these are more like dials, because I know it's some combination of all of these things, workforce. But what would you say are maybe some of the top barriers that we're experiencing related to this gap? Like, why are we so far behind?
Right.
Wait, actually, it's not just, I'm sorry, thinking as I say it, it's not just, to me, it's not just about the gap, because we set a pretty ambitious goal, but actually what was illuminating in your presentation was when you said, we've been working on this concept and this work since 2007, and we've reached 6.6%, right? So maybe what are some of the difficulties in even getting, from 2007 to today, but then what's, I think maybe that is as important as the latter part too.
Right. So, like you said, it's layers. So first layer is just technology. You're putting, what you're trying to do is build out a massive amount of variable wind and solar resources and plugging them into a transmission system that was built for a completely different type of power plant portfolio, right? So when that wind farm connects to the transmission system, that transmission system needs to be able to accommodate the full output of that wind farm, right? And below. So new transmission takes sometimes 10 years to build. So there are a lot of projects out there that could be built today, could generate electricity today, but couldn't deliver it because doing so would overwhelm the transmission system. So I think that's a big issue. I think another issue is financial. In the past, the RPS just wasn't funded sufficiently or reliably, and in some cases managed appropriately to make sure that there was enough money to make payments to all the entities that are counting on that revenue to supply financing. We had a situation before the passage of CEJA where the Illinois Power Agency had to notify hundreds of developers that they might be a little short on their renewable energy credit payments, and you can't do that. You will never recover if you default. You just won't. Well, I shouldn't say never. Never in your career or my career will you recover. So that's a challenge. I think also process, right? It's a very lengthy process. You got to have a plan. It has to be approved by the Commerce Commission. It's got to then be implemented. Then you got to do bidding, and it's just when you have government involved, it's not that nimble process that everybody talks about by design, right? You don't want people shooting from the hip on $100 million procurements, right? I'm not saying that they should do that. I'm just saying that it's the nature of the beast in this type of a process. That's why the self-direct is going to be interesting to see how that works. Is business going to step up and actually do this, right? Or City of Chicago, that embedded renewable energy purchase in its retail supply contract, right? As we see, I think private sector and local governments getting more creative, I think that that will help supplement what the state's doing, and maybe together everybody gets there. But it's technological, physical constraints, financial constraints, and then procedural constraints. So in that order that I would.
What about
say.
intellectual restraints?
I'm sorry?
Intellectual restraints.
Sometimes.
Anyone else? Chime in, please. Otherwise, we'll conclude today's class. Well, thank you again, everybody. Professor Pruitt, thank you. Any last parting words?
No, I think this is all manageable. But kind of going back to our model of what can you control, what can you influence, and thinking through at that really rudimentary level, you start to find, hey, I do have levers, right? I can make this work. I just need to align these opportunities with what I want to claim credit for, right? Maybe work that process backwards and say, what do I want to claim? And then which of these tools get me what I need to make that claim? And then I start with what I control, and then what I can sponsor, and then what I can influence. And I think you can build on your own sustainability plan. Maybe it's a renewable deployment plan, right, which is separate from your sustainability plan, but it's a deployment plan. It gets down to that transactional nitty-gritty that helps you deliver on those broader goals that are identified in your sustainability plan.
I do have one more question, and then again, if ever anybody needs to leave. So I'm smiling because I'm thinking back to an environment committee that we had, Mark, many years ago, and the topic was 100% renewable, right? So we talked about, and you started to address a little bit of this gap. This was before, I'm not even sure if FEJA was out yet when we started working on this, maybe it had been done, but there's still, this is a little bit of a political question. So there's still an understanding and expectation that there's going to be this 100% renewable, that's achievable. So if you are a municipal official and you are getting a request from your constituents to take a pledge, to be, to 100% renewable pledge, what is the appropriate response to that? And that may not be one that you've got. You may want to come back to us on what that.
We're still recording, right? Oh, okay.
We can take it off record if you've got a good.
I would say we can set a goal, but when you start using words like pledge, commit, those things, I don't know what the obligations are. Is there a penalty, right? Not necessarily financial, but credibility, right? Do you want to promise on something that you can't control, right? I promise that my kid's going to be on a roll. Well, that's not up to me, right? So I would be reluctant. I would probably turn around and say, why don't you tell me how we get there? In fact, don't even tell, let's split it in half. You tell me how to get to the first 50%. I'll tell you how to get to the second 50% so we can get to that 100 number. Now that might be viewed as snarky, but I think this might not be popular. I think the sloganeers out there are intellectually lazy. They want somebody to do their homework for them. And to a certain extent, you need to do that as a public servant, but they're also responsible for bringing achievable, measurable, and financeable solutions forward. They can't simply say, this is your problem, fix it, which is where I've heard some of these conversations in public forums, and that was my take from the requestors, make it so. And I just am uncomfortable making commitments that are outside of my control. So I wouldn't take it myself.
Thank
But
you.
then again, I'm not an elected official, so I have the luxury of not having to deal with that.
Well, Mark, as always, thank you very much. We appreciate so much your time and, of course, your intellectual prowess. So thank you.
Or political doublespeak. I do
Yeah, hey,
that.
what the hell? Whatever works, man. It's like-
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy your day. Have a safe holiday weekend if you celebrate.